There's a moment in the series finale of Gravity Falls that I think about more than any other moment in animation. And it's not a battle. It's not a twist. It's not even a line of dialogue, really. It's a face. It's the face of an old man sitting in the burning wreckage of his own mind, watching his memories dissolve around him like paper thrown into a fireplace, and he's smiling. He's holding a photograph of two kids he won't remember in about 30 seconds. And the last thing he says, before everything he's ever been gets swallowed up by blue fire, is this.
Guess I was good for something after all.
I guess I was good for something after all. That's Grunkle Stan. That's Stanley Pines, the con man, the grifter, the guy who literally sees tourists as wallets with legs. The guy who can't say please, because according to him, that word never made anybody any money. The man who spent 30 years hiding behind a stolen name, running a fake tourist trap on top of an interdimensional portal, lying to everyone he's ever met about who he actually is. And in the end, the very end, when the world is falling apart and a trillion-year-old dream demon is about to break through to every corner of reality, that guy, that broken, greedy, stubborn, beautiful old man, is the one who saves everything. Not the genius, not the hero, the screw-up, the family disappointment, the one who got kicked out. And honestly, I think that's the most profound thing Gravity Falls ever did. Not the ciphers, not the codes hidden in the credits, not Bill Cipher's backwards messages, or the interdimensional portal, or the journals. All of that is incredible. Don't get me wrong. But the thing that makes this show last, the thing that keeps people coming back to it years after it ended, is what it has to say about a 60-something-year-old man in a fez and boxer shorts. Because underneath all the mystery and all the supernatural weirdness, Gravity Falls is really a show about one question. What makes a person worth something? And Grunkle Stan's answer to that question is the most heartbreaking, the most human, the most real answer I've ever seen in a cartoon, maybe in anything. So tonight, we're going through all of it. The whole philosophy of Stanley Pines, from the very first episode, where he's just the funny con artist uncle, all the way through to that moment in the finale where he gives up everything, his identity, his memories, his entire self, for the people he loves. We're going to talk about what Stan believes, how those beliefs were formed, why he lies, why he steals, why he pushes people away, and why, underneath all of it, he might be the most selfless character in the entire show. We're going to talk about fathers and brothers, and what happens when the people who are supposed to love you decide you're not worth the trouble. We're going to talk about what it means to build a life out of lies, and somehow end up with something real. And if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable, because we're going to be here for a while. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these for you. Every sub, every like, it matters more than you think. But right now, just settle in. This one's going to hit different. Let's start where the show starts, June 15th, 2012. That's when the first episode of Gravity Falls aired as a sneak preview on Disney Channel. The show officially premiered on June 29th. And in that very first episode, Tourist Trapped, we meet Grunkle Stan as what he appears to be. A grumpy, cheap, slightly criminal old man who runs a tourist trap in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. He wears a fez. He carries a cane topped with an 8-ball. He overcharges customers for what are obviously fake attractions, bad taxidermy, made-up creatures, ripped-off merchandise. Alex Hirsch voices him with this gruff, low register that he's described in interviews as a blend of his real-life Grandpa Stan and his other grandfather, Grandpa Bill. Hirsch told Time magazine that Grandpa Stan was a guy that told tall tales and would frequently mess with us to get a rise out of us. And that's exactly what Grunkle Stan does. He messes with people, he tells lies, he makes things up, and he charges admission for it. But here's what's easy to miss in that first episode. Here's what most people don't catch until their second or third rewatch. In the very last scene of Tourist Trapped, after Dipper and Mabel have defeated the gnomes and settled into their summer in Gravity Falls, there's a brief shot of Stan going behind the vending machine in the Mystery Shack. He punches in a code, a hidden door opens, and he descends into a secret underground laboratory that nobody else knows about. That shot lasts maybe 10 seconds, and it changes everything about who this character is. Because from the very first episode, Alex Hirsch knew. He knew that Stan wasn't just a con man. He wasn't just the comic relief. He was the show's biggest mystery. Hirsch confirmed in interviews that he had the beginning, middle, and end of Gravity Falls planned from the moment he pitched the series. He told Oh My Disney that the entire story was mapped out when the show was first greenlit. And that means the final sacrifice, Stan giving up his mind to save the world, was baked into this character from day one. Think about that for a second. Every joke about Stan being cheap, every scene of him scamming tourists, every time he tells Dipper to stop looking into the supernatural mysteries of Gravity Falls. All of it was written by someone who knew that this man was going to end up being the hero. And not just any hero, the kind of hero who doesn't get to remember that he was heroic. I've rewatched the first season probably 4 or 5 times now, putting this video together, and the thing that strikes me every time is how carefully the show builds Stan's philosophy before it ever explains where it came from. In those first 20 episodes, before we know anything about his backstory, before we know about Ford or Glass Shard Beach or any of it, the show gives us a complete worldview just through Stan's actions and dialogue. And that worldview is this: the world is harsh, people will let you down, trust is for suckers, and the only thing you can rely on is money and yourself. That's what Stan believes. Or at least, that's what he wants everyone to think he believes. Look at Boss Mabel, Season 1, Episode 13, which aired on February 15th, 2013. In that episode, Mabel challenges Stan to a bet. She thinks she can make more money running the Mystery Shack by being nice than Stan makes by being, well, Stan. And there's this moment early in the episode where Mabel asks Stan about the concept of saying please to customers. And Stan, and I love this, Stan literally does not understand the value of the word. He says that please never made him any money. It's played for laughs, and it is funny, but it's also genuinely revealing. This is a man who has, at this point in his life, reduced every human interaction to a transaction. Everything has a price. Kindness is a commodity he can't afford. And the episode actually validates a piece of Stan's philosophy, because Mabel does end up having to get tough to keep the shack running. She puts on the fez. She starts barking orders. She becomes, for a brief moment, her grunkle. The lesson isn't that Stan is wrong about everything. It's that he's built his entire personality around one narrow slice of truth, that the world is hard, and you have to be hard to survive it, and ignored everything else. And here's the thing that gets me about that episode. Stan goes on a game show called Cash Wheel while Mabel runs the shack. He wins $300,000. He's on top of the world. And then he loses it all because he can't guess the final word. The word is please. The word he doesn't know. The word that, in his philosophy, has no value. And it costs him everything. The show is literally telling you, in Season 1, that Stan's worldview has a blind spot. That the thing he's most contemptuous of, basic human decency, vulnerability, asking for things instead of taking them, is the thing that could save him. And he just can't see it. Not yet. That's the first layer of Stan's philosophy. And if the show had only ever been about a funny con man, it would be enough. But Gravity Falls isn't just about what Stan believes. It's about why he believes it. And to understand that, you have to go to Dreamscapers, Season 1, Episode 19, aired July 12th, 2013. This is the one where Lil Gideon summons Bill Cipher for the first time, and Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss have to enter Stan's mind to stop Bill from stealing the combination to the Mystery Shack's safe. And this episode is, I think, the first time Gravity Falls tells you outright that Stan is more than what he appears. Because the B-plot of this episode, and honestly, it hits harder than the A-plot, is about Dipper trying to understand why Stan is so hard on him. Dipper finds a door in Stan's mindscape, a door labeled with a keep out sign and a pine tree symbol. And behind that door are Stan's memories of Dipper. And what Dipper sees, at first, hurts him. He sees Stan confiding in Seuss that Dipper is kind of a wimp, that he's not tough enough, and Dipper takes that at face value, because that's what 12-year-olds do. But then he goes deeper. He follows the memories further back, and he finds the real story. Stan, as a kid, getting bullied, getting beat up on the playground, being the weak one. And then his father, their father, Philbrick Pines, who we'll meet properly later, signing him up for boxing lessons. Not out of love, mind you, out of the same cold, practical, almost cruel pragmatism that defines everything about Philbrick. And Stan learns to fight. He learns to be tough, and that toughness eventually pays off when he stops a mugger from stealing his girlfriend Carla McCorkle's purse. The lesson Stan took from his own childhood, the lesson he's trying to pass on to Dipper, is this: the world will hurt you, and the only way to survive it is to be harder than it is. And here's the part that really kills me. Stan isn't wrong. His experience taught him that. The bullies were real. The absent, emotionally cold father was real. Getting kicked out of his own home was real. Stan's philosophy isn't irrational. It's a survival mechanism that was forged in actual pain. And the tragedy is that it works. It keeps him alive. It keeps him functioning. But it also keeps him alone. It keeps him from saying what he actually feels. It keeps him from admitting that he's been working for 30 years in a basement because he loves his brother and wants him back. Because in Stan's philosophy, love is weakness. Vulnerability is a con you run on yourself. And the only safe way to care about someone is to never, ever let them know. I need you to think about that for a second. Because that's not just a cartoon character's quirk. That's a real thing that real people live with every single day. And the fact that a Disney animated series for kids managed to portray that with this level of nuance and compassion is something I don't think gets enough credit. And you know what's funny? Alex Hirsch created this character when he was 26 years old. The show premiered in 2012, and Hirsch was born in 1985. He was writing about a 60-year-old man's defense mechanisms and emotional scars while he was barely out of his mid-20s, and he nailed it. He nailed it because he based Stan on real people, his grandfather, his great-aunt Lois, and because he understood something that a lot of writers don't, that the funniest characters are often the saddest, and the saddest characters are often the bravest, and the bravest characters are the ones who get up every morning and pretend they're fine when they're not. And you know what I keep thinking about? The way Alex Hirsch voices Stan in that episode. Hirsch has talked about how Stan's voice is partly based on his grandpa Stan, and partly based on his grandpa Bill. He told Time magazine that every Thanksgiving, his grandpa Bill would say things like, "Roll out the red carpet. Mr. Hollywood finally decides to pay us a visit." That energy, that constant busting of chops, that refusal to be sincere, that automatic deflection into jokes, that's the exact same energy Stan brings to every emotional moment in the show, and Hirsch performs it beautifully. There's a warmth under the gruff delivery that you can hear if you listen carefully. It's in the slight pauses, the moments where Stan starts to say something real and then catches himself and covers it with a joke. The way his voice drops half a register when he's being genuine, like the words are heavier. I think a lot about how personal this show must have been for Hirsch. He's said in a Collider interview that the main relationship in the show, Dipper and Mabel, is 100% mine, from my own childhood. He and his twin sister Ariel are the direct inspiration, and Stan is based on his real grandfather. So when Stan gets emotional about the twins, when he makes those fishing hats or threatens that bus driver, there's a layer of real-life love underneath the fiction. You can feel it. And I think that's why Stan works so well as a character. He's not an invention. He's an observation. He's someone Alex Hirsch knew, filtered through fiction, and animated with incredible care, and given a story that honors the complexity of the real people who inspired him. And Hirsch's real grandfather, by the way, the real Stan, his ashes were illegally spread in a women's room at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, so he could, and I quote, "see the ladies undress forever." That's the kind of family Hirsch comes from. That's the energy. You can't make this stuff up. Or rather, you can, but it works better when you don't have to. One more thing about Season 1 before we move on. I want to talk about Bottomless Pit. Season 1, Episode 14, aired March 1st, 2013. It's a short story anthology episode. Stan, Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss fall into a bottomless pit and tell stories to pass the time. And one of Mabel's stories in that episode is about Stan's compulsive lying. She forces a set of truth-telling teeth into his mouth, and suddenly, he can't stop being honest. And his honesty is so brutal, so unfiltered, so completely lacking in social grace that it nearly gets him arrested. And that's played for comedy. And it is hilarious. But there's something deeper there. The truth-telling teeth episode is the show's way of saying Stan's lying isn't just a habit, it's a survival mechanism. When he's forced to be honest, everything falls apart. His relationships, his business, his freedom, all of it depends on the lies. And that's not because the truth is bad. It's because Stan doesn't know how to deliver truth with any kind of warmth or tact. He's been so out of practice with sincerity that when he has to be honest, it comes out raw and cutting and destructive. The lies aren't just protecting Stan from the world. They're protecting the world from Stan's version of honesty. And here's the thing that's wild about that. By the finale, Stan learns to be honest at the exact right moment. He says please to Mabel. He says trust me to Ford. He drops the mask and speaks from the heart. And it's not smooth. It's not eloquent. But it's enough. The character arc from I lie because the truth destroys everything to the truth is the only thing that can save us. That's happening across 40 episodes, and the show earns every step of it. Let me also talk about something else that's happening in Season 1 that often gets overlooked in Stan analysis, his relationship with Seuss. Because Seuss is, in a lot of ways, the person who proves that Stan is capable of real connection even before the big revelations of Season 2. Seuss adores Stan. That's obvious from the first episode. He works at the Mystery Shack, not because the pay is good, it's almost certainly terrible, but because he genuinely loves Stan. He writes fan fiction about him. He follows his orders without question. In Dreamscaperers, when Stan is sleeping and vulnerable, Seuss helps protect his mind from Bill. And when the shack is under threat in Gideon Rises, Seuss is the first person Stan calls. Not because Seuss is the most capable, but because Stan trusts him. And that trust, coming from a man who claims trust is for suckers, tells you everything. And here's the thing about Seuss that ties into Stan's philosophy. Seuss had an absent father. His father left when Seuss was young, and Stan, without ever acknowledging it, without ever naming it, became the father figure Seuss never had. He gave Seuss a job. He gave him a place to belong. He gave him purpose. And yes, he did it gruffly. Yes, he paid Seuss badly and made him do dangerous things and never said, "I appreciate you." But the relationship was real. And when Stan promotes Seuss to manager of the Mystery Shack at the end of the series, it's not just a business decision. It's a father passing something on to a son. And the fact that Stan can do that, can recognize that Seuss deserves this, can let go of control, can trust someone else with the thing he built, shows you how far he's come from the man who said, "Trust is for suckers." There's another layer to the Stan and Seuss dynamic that I want to dig into, because it connects to something broader about how Stan operates. In Seuss and the Real Girl, Season 2, Episode 5, aired September 22nd, 2014. Seuss is trying to find a girlfriend before his grandmother's birthday, and he turns to a dating simulator game for help. And Stan's role in that episode is small, but telling. He doesn't mock Seuss for wanting love. He doesn't discourage him from trying. He's actually, in his gruff way, supportive. And that tells you something important about Stan. He doesn't project his own cynicism about relationships onto other people. He's given up on love for himself. He thinks he's too old, too broken, too set in his ways. But he doesn't try to convince Seuss that love isn't worth pursuing. There's a generosity in that. An acknowledgement that just because his own heart is walled off doesn't mean everyone else's should be. And I think that generosity extends to how Stan treats the kids' emotions throughout the series. He doesn't understand them. He doesn't share them, but he respects them in his way. When Mabel is heartbroken, Stan doesn't tell her to toughen up. He says something awkward and wrong, and then does something unexpectedly kind, like saving Waddles. When Dipper is scared, Stan doesn't belittle him. He tells him, in his own rough language, that the fear is something you can fight. Stan's emotional intelligence is terrible. His emotional generosity, when you look at it closely, is enormous. I want to talk about one more thing before we leave Season 1, and it's something that I think deserves way more attention than it gets. Let's talk about Stan's hidden intelligence. One of the most common misreadings of Stan is that he's dumb. The show plays into this. He can't guess the word please on Cash Wheel. He mispronounces things. He doesn't understand science. He seems like a lovable but dim old man. But that reading is completely wrong, and the show tells you it's wrong multiple times. Stan built a working interdimensional portal by himself, without a college degree, without Ford's journals initially. He had to steal them from Gideon and collect them over time, without any formal training in physics or engineering. He looked at Ford's blueprints, taught himself the science, and spent 30 years troubleshooting and refining a machine that the greatest scientific minds in Gravity Falls couldn't comprehend. That's not dumb. That's genius-level problem solving applied with absolute relentless determination. And the show hides this intelligence the same way Stan hides it. Behind the jokes, behind the fez, behind the "aw, I'm just a dumb con man" act. Because that's Stan's real con. The greatest con Stan Pines ever pulled isn't convincing the world he's Stanford. It's convincing the world he's stupid. Because if people think you're stupid, they underestimate you. They don't watch you as carefully. They don't question what you're doing in the basement at 3 in the morning. Stan learned early in life that being the dumb twin had one advantage. Nobody expects anything from you, which means nobody stops you from doing the impossible in secret. And that idea, that intelligence comes in different forms, that the person who can't pass a test might be the person who builds a portal, is one of the show's most quietly radical messages. It pushes back against the idea that worth is measured by grades and degrees and formal achievement. Ford is the credentialed genius. Stan is the uncredentialed one. And in the end, Stan's type of intelligence, street smart, adaptive, creative, stubborn beyond reason, is the one that saves everything. Not because book smarts don't matter, but because there's more than one way to be brilliant. I'm going to tell you something I haven't told many people. I've been thinking about this video for a long time, and the reason it took so long is that Stan's story is hard to talk about without getting personal, because I think most of us know a Stan. Most of us have someone in our lives who shows love through gruffness, who can't say what they feel, who deflects every emotional moment with a joke or a complaint or an exit. And those people are frustrating and exhausting and sometimes infuriating, but they're also trying. In their own messed up, roundabout, emotionally constipated way, they're trying. And Gravity Falls is maybe the first show I've ever seen that says, we see them, we understand them, and they're worth telling a story about. Alright, so let's move into the part of the show that changes everything. Let me take us to the Season 1 finale and into the early parts of Season 2. Gideon Rises, Season 1, Episode 20, aired August 2nd, 2013. This is the episode where Gideon takes over the Mystery Shack. He steals the deed. He evicts the Pines family. And there's this moment where Stan is standing in front of the shack. His shack. The thing he built. The thing he spent decades protecting. And it's being demolished. And he can't do anything about it. He's lost. For maybe the first time in the show, Stan doesn't have a scheme. He doesn't have an angle. He's just a sad old man watching his life get torn apart. And what does he do? He pulls Dipper and Mabel close. He tells them they'll figure it out. He puts on the brave face, because that's what Stan does. The shack isn't just a building to him. It's not just a business. It's the cover story for the most important thing in his life, the portal in the basement, the machine he's been building for 30 years to bring his brother back. When Gideon takes the shack, Stan doesn't just lose his livelihood. He loses access to the portal. He loses his chance to fix the worst mistake he ever made. And the show knows this, even if the audience doesn't yet. But here's what Stan actually does. He fights. Not with a plan, not with a con, with his bare hands and his stubbornness, and Dipper and Mabel and Seuss. They take the shack back. And in the final moments of that episode, after everything is resolved and Gideon is defeated, Stan goes back down into the basement. He pulls out Journal 1. He puts all 3 journals together, and he activates the portal. And the last line of Season 1, the line that sent the entire fandom into absolute chaos, is Stan saying, "Here we go, 30 years. That's how long he's been working on this. 30 years of lying. 30 years of running a fake tourist trap to fund a real interdimensional rescue mission. 30 years of sleeping in a house with a portal to another dimension humming underneath it. And nobody knew. Not Seuss, not Wendy, not the kids, nobody." And I think that's the moment where Stan's philosophy stops being just funny, grumpy uncle and starts being something genuinely philosophical. Because what Stan did for those 30 years is, depending on how you look at it, either the most selfless or the most selfish thing any character in the show ever does. He sacrificed his entire identity, his name, his freedom, his potential, to save one person, his brother. The same brother who, from Stan's perspective, chose a college scholarship over their childhood dream. The same brother who called Stan to Gravity Falls not to reconcile, but to ask him to take a journal and disappear to the other end of the world. The same brother who got sucked into a portal because they were fighting. And Stan spent 30 years trying to undo that. Not because Ford asked him to, not because anyone told him to, because despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the rejection, despite the fact that his own father kicked him out onto the street as a teenager, Stanley Pines believes in family. He believes in it so deeply that he'll destroy his own life to honor it. And he'll never, ever admit that's what he's doing. Because admitting it would mean being vulnerable. And vulnerability, in Stan's world, gets you hurt. That's the contradiction at the heart of Grunkle Stan. He's a man who believes trust is for suckers, but who has spent his entire adult life on an act of almost insane trust. Trusting that if he just keeps working on the portal, if he just keeps going, he'll get his brother back. He's a cynic whose life is built on the most optimistic gamble imaginable. He's a liar who has organized his entire existence around one truth. Family matters more than anything. Okay, so let's get into the big one. Let's get into the episode that changes everything, not what he seems. Season 2, Episode 11, aired March 9th, 2015, on Disney XD. This episode was watched by 2.06 million viewers on its original air date, making it the most watched episode on Disney XD at that time. It holds a 9.8 on IMDb, and it earned it. I'm not going to do a full recap here, because if you're watching this, you probably know what happens. But I want to talk about one specific moment. The moment that defines Stan's entire philosophy. The moment that answers the question the show has been asking since episode 1. The portal is about to activate. Gravity is going haywire. Objects are floating. The mystery shack is falling apart. Government agents are outside. And Dipper has figured out that Stan has been lying about everything. His name, his past, the journals, all of it. Dipper is standing next to the emergency shutdown button, and he tells Mabel to press it, to stop the portal, to save the world, potentially, from whatever is going to come through. And Stan is pinned against the wall. He can't move. He can't reach the button. All he can do is talk. And what does he say? He says, "Mabel, please, you have to trust me. Please." The word he doesn't know. The word that never made him any money. The word he couldn't guess on Cash Wheel. The word he's spent his entire life refusing to say. He says it now, and Mabel trusts him. She doesn't press the button. The portal activates, and through it walks Stanford Pine, the real Stanford Pines. Stan's twin brother, the author of the journals, missing for 30 years. And look, I know that moment is primarily Mabel's moment. It's about her choice to trust, but I think it's even more Stan's moment. Because for the first time in the entire series, Stan drops the act. He doesn't scheme his way out of it. He doesn't lie. He doesn't threaten or bribe or con. He asks. He uses the one word he's always been too proud, too scared, too damaged to use. And it works. Not because it made him money. Not because it gave him an advantage. Because someone believed him. Because despite everything, the connection he's built with these kids, the love he'd never admit to feeling, is real enough that when everything is on the line, it holds. I've rewatched that scene probably 6 times putting this together, and it hits different every time. Because the show spent an entire season and a half teaching you that Stan doesn't say, please. That he sees vulnerability as weakness. That his whole identity is built on being the tough guy, the con man, the one who takes what he wants. And then, in the most important moment of his life, he throws all of it away. He makes himself completely, utterly vulnerable. And it saves everything. That's philosophy. That's real, genuine, earned philosophy. Not some character lecturing you about the power of honesty. Not some after-school special about being yourself. A deeply flawed, deeply broken man, at the end of his rope, finding the one word he'd been too afraid to say his whole life, and it being enough. But the show doesn't let Stan off the hook. And this is where Gravity Falls gets really smart, really mature, really honest about what it means to be a complicated person. Because the very next episode is A Tale of Two Stans. Season 2, Episode 12, aired July 13th, 2015 on Disney XD. It pulled 1.91 million viewers and set a new record for the network. It has a 9.6 on IMDb. And it's the episode where we finally get the full story of Stanley and Stanford Pines. The entire backstory, start to finish, told in a single 30-minute episode with no commercial breaks in its original airing. And here's where I need to slow down, because the backstory of the Pines twins is, I think, the emotional backbone of the entire series. It's the reason Stan is the way he is. It's the reason he lies, steals, pushes people away, and can't say, please. And it's the reason his eventual sacrifice means so much. Stan and Ford were born in Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey. The name alone tells you everything about their childhood, a place where the beach is made of broken glass. Their father, Philbrick Pines, was voiced by Jonathan Banks, the same actor who played Mike Ehrmantraut in Breaking Bad. And that casting is perfect because Philbrick is essentially Mike, without the occasional moment of warmth. He's cold, he's practical, he's emotionally absent. Their mother, Corinne Romanoff Pines, seems warmer. She calls Stanley her little free spirit. But the show gives her almost nothing to work with. She's there, but she doesn't intervene. She doesn't protect. When the hammer falls, she watches. And the hammer falls because of a science fair project. Ford, Stanford, the genius twin, the six-fingered prodigy, has built a perpetual motion machine. It's his ticket to West Coast Tech, a prestigious university. It's the family's ticket out of New Jersey, as Philbrick puts it. Notice the language there. Ford isn't valued for being Ford. He's valued for what he can produce, for what he can earn, for his utility. And Stan's project at the same science fair is something called the Footbot, which is exactly as dumb as it sounds. Stan isn't the smart one. He never was. He's the funny one, the tough one, the one who punches bullies and explores caves and dreams of sailing around the world with his brother on a boat they call the Stan War. And then Stan breaks Ford's machine, by accident, maybe. The show leaves a tiny, deliberate ambiguity about whether Stan sabotaged the project on purpose or genuinely bumped into it by mistake. Ford believes it was intentional. Stan says it wasn't, and the truth is, it doesn't matter, because the result is the same. Ford doesn't get into West Coast tech. And Philbrick kicks Stan out of the house. Not Ford. Stan. The one who, in Philbrick's eyes, cost them their meal ticket. Philbrick throws his teenage son out onto the street, into a car with a bumper sticker that reads, "I heart NJ," and tells him not to come back until he's made something of himself, until he's worth something, until he's produced enough value to justify his existence. And that, right there, is the seed of everything. Every lie Stan tells, every dollar he hoards, every scam he runs, every time he says, money is the only thing that matters. It all comes back to a father who looked at his own child and said, "You're not enough. I need you to sit with that for a second." Because a lot of people watch Gravity Falls and see Stan's greed as a joke. It is a joke. A lot of the time. The show plays it for laughs constantly. But underneath the laughs, there's this foundational wound. Stan is greedy because his father taught him that his worth is measured in dollars. Stan can't say please because his father never showed him that vulnerability is safe. Stan lies about who he is because the person he actually is, Stanley Pines, the slow twin, the troublemaker, the screw-up, was literally expelled from his own family. And here's what makes it even more tragic. After Philbrick kicks him out, Stan tries. He really, genuinely tries to make something of himself. He becomes a salesman. He invents products. The Stan Vac, the Shammy Sham. What a racket. Every single one of them fails. He gets arrested. He gets banned from entire states. He assumes fake identities. He ends up living in his car, eating stolen food, running out of options. And through all of it, there's this unspoken question hanging over every scene. Is he trying to succeed for himself? Or is he trying to prove to his father that he's worth something? I think the answer is both. And I think that's what makes Stan so real. He's not purely noble. He's not purely selfish. He's a mess. He's a human being doing the best he can with the tools he was given. And the tools he was given are terrible. He was given a father who valued production over love. A brother who, intentionally or not, was always going to be the favorite. And a world that kept telling him, over and over, that he wasn't enough. And then Ford calls him, after 10 years of silence, after a decade of Stan getting beaten up by life, scraping by, failing at everything. Ford calls and says, "Come to Gravity Falls. I need you." And for one moment, Stan thinks this is it. This is the reconciliation. This is his brother saying, "I was wrong. I still care about you. Let's fix this." But that's not what Ford wants. Ford doesn't want to reconcile. Ford wants Stan to take Journal 1 and disappear, to take it to the other end of the world so that no one can ever put the 3 journals together and activate the portal. Ford is paranoid, terrified of Bill Cipher, losing his grip on reality. And he sees Stan not as a brother to reconnect with, but as a tool, a courier, someone disposable enough to trust with a dangerous errand. And Stan says no, not because he doesn't care about the danger, because he's hurt. Because after 10 years of nothing, the only reason his brother called was to use him. And they fight, physically, in front of the portal. And in the struggle, Ford gets pushed through, into another dimension, gone, just like that. Now I want to be really careful here, because the show is genuinely balanced in how it presents this conflict. Ford isn't a villain. He's scared. He's been manipulated by Bill Cipher. He's trying to protect the world. And his anger at Stan isn't unfounded. Stan did accidentally cost him his dream school. But the show also makes it clear, through every choice it makes in A Tale of Two Stans, that Stan's pain is real and valid and earned. He didn't choose to be the less talented twin. He didn't choose to have a father who measured love in dollar signs. He didn't choose for his brother to call him after 10 years only to ask him to leave again. And here's the part of Stan's philosophy that I think is the deepest, the most buried, the hardest to see. After Ford disappears into the portal, Stan could leave. He could walk away. He could go back to his life on the road, running scams, surviving. Nobody would blame him. Nobody would even know. But he stays, and he assumes Ford's identity. He starts calling himself Stanford. He opens the Mystery Shack, using Ford's strange collection of artifacts as the basis for a tourist trap. By day, he gives tours and sells knickknacks. By night, he goes into the basement and works on the portal for 30 years, 3 decades, alone. Let me give you a sense of what those 30 years actually looked like, because I think the show undersells this for time reasons, and it's worth sitting with. 30 years. That's roughly 1982 to 2012. When Stan started working on the portal, he was a young man. When the twins arrived in Gravity Falls, he was in his 60s. Stan spent his 20s, his 30s, his 40s, his 50s, and half his 60s in that basement. He missed decades of ordinary human experience because every night, after closing up the shack and counting his money and pretending to be someone he wasn't, he went underground and tried to fix a machine he barely understood. And he was alone for all of it. Completely, utterly alone. He had no one to talk to about what he was doing. No one to help. No one to share the burden, or the hope, or the fear. Seuss was around for the later years, and the show hints that Stan treated Seuss like a son. But Stan never told Seuss about the portal. He never told anyone. He carried the secret, and the work, and the loneliness by himself. Because that's what Stan does. He does things by himself, not because he wants to. Because he's terrified that if he asks for help, the answer will be no. And if the answer is no, it will confirm what his father told him, that he's not worth helping. I've rewatched the montage of Stan working on the portal probably more times than any other scene in the show, and it hits different every time. Because the show compresses 30 years into about 90 seconds, and you see Stan poring over Ford's blueprints by candlelight, Stan soldering circuits, Stan burning himself on hot metal, Stan falling asleep at his desk, Stan going upstairs, putting on the fez, smiling at tourists, selling fake attractions, acting like everything's fine, and then going back down, night after night, year after year, decade after decade. That's not greed. That's not selfishness. That's not a con. That's devotion. Pure, stubborn, irrational, beautiful devotion. The kind of devotion that only comes from a love so deep and so denied that it can only express itself through action. Stan can't say, "I love my brother and I'd do anything to bring him back." But he can work on the portal until his hands bleed. He can teach himself physics from stolen textbooks. He can sacrifice his name, his identity, his freedom, his youth, his entire life, night after night, in a cold basement for the one person who might not even want to see him again. And nobody knows. That's the part that really gets me. Nobody in Gravity Falls has any idea what Stan is doing. They think he's just a weird old tourist trap owner. No one, not one single person in 30 years, ever looks at Stanley Pines and thinks, that man is a hero. And Stan doesn't need them to. He doesn't do it for recognition. He doesn't do it for glory. He doesn't even do it for gratitude. He does it because of a promise. The unspoken promise he made to himself standing in his brother's empty house, looking at the portal that had just swallowed the only person who ever made him feel like he mattered. I'm going to fix this. I don't know how. I don't know how long it'll take. But I'm going to fix this, and he did. And this is where Stan's philosophy becomes something more than a set of cynical one-liners about money and trust. Because what Stan does for those 30 years is a complete contradiction of everything he claims to believe. He says money is what matters, but he spends every cent he earns on the portal. He says trust is for suckers, but he's trusting that the portal will work, that Ford is alive on the other side, that this insane gamble will pay off. He says family is just another word for people who let you down, but he's sacrificing his entire life for family. Stan is a man whose actions are in constant war with his words. And I think that's the most honest portrayal of a certain kind of person I've ever seen in fiction. Because there are millions of people like Stan. People who grew up being told they weren't enough. People who learned to hide behind cynicism and humor and toughness because the alternative, being open, being vulnerable, admitting they care, is terrifying. People who will say, I don't need anyone, and then drive 6 hours in the rain to help a friend move. And here's another layer to Stan that I want to explore, because it connects everything we've been talking about. Let's talk about Stan's relationship with the supernatural. Throughout the first season, Stan acts like the supernatural doesn't exist. When Dipper tries to tell him about gnomes, zombies, or anything weird happening in Gravity Falls, Stan brushes it off. He says Dipper is imagining things. He says the town is perfectly normal. He scoffs at the journal and its contents. And for most of the first season, you're meant to take this at face value. Stan is a skeptic, a mundane guy in a magical town, oblivious to the weirdness around him. But then comes Scary Oak. Season 2, Episode 1, aired August 1st, 2014 on Disney Channel, where the show reveals that Stan has known about the supernatural the entire time. He's been faking ignorance, on purpose, because he believes the supernatural is dangerous, and he wants to keep the kids away from it. And here's what that means for Stan's philosophy. His skepticism was never about doubting the supernatural. It was about protecting people from it. Every time Stan told Dipper to stop investigating, every time he dismissed a monster sighting or rolled his eyes at the journal, he was running a con, the biggest con of all. He was pretending the world was safe because the truth, that Gravity Falls is crawling with dangerous creatures and being targeted by interdimensional forces, was too terrifying to share with 12-year-olds. And that connects directly to what we were saying about Stan and dishonesty. Stan lies to protect people. That's his pattern. He lies about his identity to keep the Portal Project safe. He lies about the supernatural to keep the kids safe. He lies about his feelings to keep himself safe. The lying is always in service of protection. And the question the show keeps asking is, does protection through deception actually work? Is keeping someone safe through lies the same as keeping them safe? And the answer, consistently, is no. The kids keep getting into danger precisely because Stan won't tell them the truth. If Stan had told Dipper about the supernatural from the beginning, Dipper might have been more prepared, more careful, better equipped. But Stan can't bring himself to do that, because his entire life has taught him that truth leads to pain. His truth, I'm not Stanford, I'm Stanley, I'm the one who ruined everything, has been the source of all his suffering. So he projects that onto every truth. He assumes that all honesty is destructive. And in trying to protect the kids from the truth about Gravity Falls, he actually puts them in more danger. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking irony. The man who lies to protect is the man whose lies create the very danger he's trying to prevent. And the show traces this irony all the way through to the finale, where the only thing that can save everyone is the truth. Stan telling Ford the real plan, Ford trusting Stan enough to participate in the switch, Mabel's scrapbook of truthful memories being the thing that brings Stan back. The show's conclusion, its final philosophical statement, is that truth, as painful and scary as it is the only thing that can heal. And lies, no matter how well-intentioned, always have a cost. Remember what I said earlier about Stan seeing tourists as wallets with legs? I want to come back to that, because there's something the show does with that image that I think is incredibly clever. In Boss Mabel, Stan literally hallucinates tourists as walking wallets. He sees dollar signs instead of faces. And it's funny, but it's also terrifying, in a way, because it shows you how completely Stan has dehumanized the people around him. He's reduced them to their monetary value. He's doing to them what Philbrick did to him. And that's the cycle, right? That's what the show is really about. The pain flows downhill. Philbrick treats his sons as commodities. Stan treats his customers as commodities. The behavior replicates. The wound propagate. And the question the show asks is, can you break the cycle? Can you be the person who stops the pain from flowing further? And Stan does break it. That's the miracle. Because despite everything Philbrick taught him, Stan never treats Dipper and Mabel as commodities. He puts them to work, sure. He makes them wear embarrassing costumes. He charges tourists to look at them. But underneath all of that, he sees them as people, as family, as the thing that matters most. And when the crisis comes, he doesn't calculate their value. He just acts. He just loves. Messily, imperfectly, inarticulately, but genuinely. The cycle breaks because Stan, at his core, is better than the philosophy he inherited from his father. And I think that might be the single most important message in Gravity Falls. Not be yourself, not follow your dreams, not friendship is magic, but this: the damage your parents did to you is real, and it's not your fault. And it's going to shape you in ways you can't always control. But you have a choice. You can pass it on, or you can absorb it. You can let the pain flow through you to the next generation, or you can be the person who stops it. And stopping it is hard. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but it's possible. It's possible because a grumpy old con man in a fez and boxer shorts proved it was possible. Stan Pines is not just a cartoon character. He's a type of person, and Gravity Falls doesn't judge him for it. The show loves him for it. The show says, yes, you're broken. Yes, your philosophy has holes in it. Yes, you've made terrible decisions and hurt people and lied about who you are. But look at what you built. Look at what you saved. Look at who you became, not in spite of your flaws, but because of the one thing underneath all of them. The thing you'd never admit to. The thing you'd rather die than say out loud. Which is that you love your family more than you love yourself. Okay, I need to take a breath here because we've been going deep, and I want to shift gears a little. Let's talk about Stan and the kids, because his relationship with Dipper and Mabel is where his philosophy gets tested in real time, and where the show does some of its best, most subtle work. When Dipper and Mabel arrive at the Mystery Shack at the beginning of the summer, Stan treats them the way he treats everything, as a transaction. He puts them to work. He makes Dipper wear embarrassing costumes. He charges tourists for the privilege of watching a 12-year-old dressed as a wolf boy. He doesn't seem particularly interested in bonding with them. He doesn't seem to see their arrival as anything more than free labor for the summer. But the show drops hints, even in the earliest episodes, that there's more going on. In The Legend of the Gobblewonker, Season 1, Episode 2, aired June 29th, 2012. Stan wants to take the kids fishing. He makes them hats, little fishing hats, and when they choose to go monster hunting with Seuss instead, Stan is genuinely hurt. He tries to find other fishing buddies at the lake, and nobody wants anything to do with him. He's the weird old man that everyone avoids. And there's this shot of him sitting alone in his boat, and it's one of the saddest images in the entire first season. Because here's the thing, Stan doesn't know how to express affection. He never learned. His father's idea of love was signing him up for boxing lessons. His brother's idea of connection was building a boat and then choosing college instead. The only language Stan speaks fluently is gruff dismissal and practical jokes and tough love. So when he wants to spend time with the kids, he doesn't say, "I love you and I want to make memories with you." He says, "Get in the boat." And when they don't get in the boat, he doesn't say, "That hurts my feelings." He says, "Fine, whatever, see if I care." And the kids, being kids, don't always see through it. Dipper, in particular, spends most of the first season misinterpreting Stan's behavior. He sees the gruffness and the dismissal and the cheapness, and he takes it at face value. He thinks Stan doesn't care. He thinks Stan is just a crummy uncle who's using them for free labor. And can you blame him? Stan has built this armor so thick, this persona so convincing, that even the people living in his house can't tell it's an act. But Mabel sees something different. Mabel, who is based on Alex Hirsch's real twin sister Ariel, has this gift for seeing past surfaces. She's the one who, in Not What He Seems, chooses to trust Stan when every piece of evidence says she shouldn't. She's the one who, throughout the series, keeps reaching out to her grunkle even when he pushes back. And I think that's because Mabel understands something about Stan that Dipper doesn't. Not intellectually, but emotionally. She understands that the meanness is a shield, that the grumpiness is a language, that when Stan says, "Get out of my way," what he often means is, "I don't know how to ask you to stay." And the show pays this off beautifully. Over the course of 2 seasons, you can track a slow, almost imperceptible shift in how Stan interacts with the kids. He starts making small concessions. He lets them take things from the Mystery Shack gift shop. He saves Waddles, Mabel's pig, because he can't stand to see her upset. He threatens a bus driver who tries to take Waddles away. He threatens a bus driver for a pig because it matters to Mabel. And there's this wonderful irony in the fact that Stan, the man who sees everything as a transaction, is constantly giving things away to these kids without expecting anything in return. He doesn't acknowledge it. He doesn't frame it as generosity. He says things like, "Take it before I change my mind." He acts like every kind gesture is an accident, a momentary lapse in his carefully constructed selfishness. But the gestures keep happening. They keep piling up. And by the time you get to the end of the series, you realize that Stan has been loving these kids the whole time. He just doesn't have the vocabulary for it. And that, I think, is where Gravity Falls' philosophy of Stan gets really interesting. Because the show isn't saying that Stan needs to change who he is. It's not saying he needs to become soft, or open, or emotionally articulate. It's saying that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes love looks like an old man making fishing hats. Sometimes love looks like threatening a bus driver over a pig. Sometimes love looks like spending 30 years in a basement, alone, rebuilding a portal to another dimension, because your brother is on the other side. Let me talk about something that I think gets overlooked in discussions about Stan. Let's talk about the lying. Stan lies constantly. He lies about who he is. He lies about his name. He lies about his past. He lies to the government, to the people of Gravity Falls, to the kids, to everyone. The show makes this a recurring joke. Stan's fake IDs, his criminal record, his invented backstory. But it's also deadly serious, because Stan's lies aren't just funny quirks. They're the foundation of his survival. Think about what happens when Stan arrives in Gravity Falls after Ford gets sucked into the portal. He's alone in his brother's house. He's grieving. He's terrified. And then he runs out of food and goes into town. And the people of Gravity Falls mistake him for Ford. They don't know Ford. They've seen him around, but nobody in town actually knows what Stanford Pines looks like up close, because Ford was a recluse who spent all his time in his basement doing research. So when Stanley walks into town wearing Ford's clothes, speaking in Ford's name, nobody questions it. And this is where Stan makes the choice that defines the next 30 years of his life. He doesn't correct them. He becomes Stanford. He opens the Mystery Shack. He builds a life on top of a lie. And here's the philosophical question the show is quietly asking. Is that wrong? I mean, obviously it's identity theft. Obviously it's fraud. But think about the context. Stan's own identity, Stanley Pines, failed salesman, high school dropout, family disgrace, has been nothing but a source of pain. Every time he's been himself, it's gotten him hurt. His father rejected him. His brother abandoned him. The world chewed him up and spit him out. So when the opportunity comes to be someone else, someone with a house, a purpose, a place in a community, he takes it. Not out of malice, out of desperation, out of the simple human desire to be somebody. And the show treats this with such compassion. It never excuses the lying. The consequences of Stan's deception are real and painful. Dipper's trust in him is shattered when the truth comes out, and it takes real work to rebuild it. But the show also never portrays Stan as a bad person for doing what he did. It understands why he did it. It understands that sometimes people build their lives on lies, not because they're dishonest, but because the truth was too painful to live with. I actually have a theory about this that I've never heard anyone else bring up. I think Stan's entire relationship with dishonesty is connected to his relationship with his father. Philbrick Pines evaluated his children based on their output, what they could produce, what they could earn, what they were worth on paper. And Stanley, by every measurable standard, was worth less than Ford, less intelligent, less accomplished, less useful. So Stanley learned to fabricate value, to create worth where there wasn't any, to make things up, sell things that didn't exist, convince people that the worthless was valuable. The Mystery Shack is literally a building where Stan takes worthless junk and sells it as treasure. That's not just a business model, that's a philosophy. It's a man who was told he was worthless, learning to convince the world, and maybe himself, that he's not. And let me push this further, because I think the parallels between the Shack and Stan's identity go even deeper than that. What is the Mystery Shack? It's a place where ordinary things are dressed up as extraordinary things. A taxidermied jackalope, a rock that looks like a face, the Sasquatch. None of it is real, but the experience is real. The tourists laugh, they buy souvenirs, they take photos, they have a good time. And on some level, doesn't the fakeness not matter? Don't the tourists get what they came for, even if none of it is genuine? That's Stan's life. He's a fake Stanford running a fake museum in a fake persona. And somehow, against all odds, the people around him get something real out of it. Dipper and Mabel get a summer that changes their lives. Suze gets a father figure and eventually a business. Wendy gets a job that lets her be herself. The town gets a weird, lovable landmark. Stan's lies produce genuine joy. His fakeness generates real connection. And I think that's the show's most provocative philosophical argument, that authenticity isn't always about what's true on paper. Sometimes it's about what's true in effect. Sometimes a con man running a fake museum is the most real person in town. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is important. The show doesn't let Stan off the hook for the lying, not entirely, because the lies have consequences. Dipper feels genuinely betrayed when the truth comes out. Ford is furious that Stan stole his name. The government nearly arrests him. The show is saying, yes, Stan's lies produced good outcomes for a lot of people, but they also produced pain, and you don't get to decide that the good outweighs the bad. The people you lied to get to decide that. And the fact that Dipper ultimately forgives Stan, that Mabel ultimately trusts him, that Ford ultimately reconciles with him, that's not because the lies didn't matter. It's because the love underneath the lies was powerful enough to survive the revelation. And that's a crucial distinction. I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, because I don't think I gave it enough space. The science fair incident, the moment that everything broke. Ford has his perpetual motion machine. It's brilliant. It's going to get him into West Coast Tech. It's going to change the trajectory of both brothers' lives. And the night before the science fair judges come to evaluate it, something happens. Stan is in the gym, alone, and he stumbles near Ford's project, and the project gets damaged. Maybe he bumped into it accidentally. Maybe, on some subconscious level, he sabotaged it because the thought of Ford leaving, of losing his only friend, his twin, the one person who made him feel like he mattered, was more than he could handle. The show never gives you a definitive answer. And I think that's intentional, because the ambiguity is the point. Whether Stan did it on purpose or by accident, the result is the same. Ford doesn't get into his dream school. And the tragedy is that it doesn't even matter what happened, because Philbrick doesn't care about intent. He cares about results. Ford was going to make the family millions. Stan ruined that. Therefore, Stan is worthless. Therefore, Stan is gone. And here's what kills me about this. Ford goes to college anyway. He gets into Backup S'more University. Not his dream school, but a school. He graduates at the top of his class. He gets a grant. He moves to Gravity Falls. He studies anomalies. He builds the portal. Ford ends up exactly where the story needs him to be, and his career is fine. The science fair incident didn't ruin Ford's life. It detoured it. Ford adapted and thrived, because that's what brilliant people do. But Stan's life was destroyed. Not because of the science fair, because of his father's reaction to the science fair. Because Philbrick's love, if you can even call it that, was conditional on utility. And once Stan failed to be useful, the love evaporated. Stan didn't just lose his home that night. He lost the framework for understanding his own value. If you're only worth what you produce, and you've produced nothing, then you're worth nothing. And Stan carries that equation inside him for the next 40 years. And you know what's really messed up? Ford carries the same equation, just from the other side. Ford's value, in Philbrick's eyes, was tied to his intelligence, his achievements, his potential earning power. Ford wasn't loved for being Ford. He was loved for being useful. And when you grow up being valued only for your brain, you start to believe that's all you are. That's why Ford becomes so obsessed with his research. That's why he can't relate to people. That's why he calls Stan to Gravity Falls, not to reconnect, but to run an errand. Ford learned the same lesson Stan did, that love is transactional, that you have to earn your place. He just learned it from the winning side of the transaction, and it damaged him just as badly, in a different way. I think this is one of the most sophisticated things Gravity Falls does. It shows you that Philbrick's parenting didn't just hurt one son, it hurt both of them. Ford got conditional love based on performance, which made him arrogant and isolated and unable to form real connections. Stan got rejection, which made him defensive and dishonest and unable to believe he deserved connection. Same father, same poison, different symptoms. And the deepest layer of that philosophy is this: if Stan can convince everyone he's Stanford, the brilliant one, the successful one, the one who matters, then maybe he can convince himself too. Maybe if he wears the name long enough, it'll fit. Maybe if he pretends to be worth something, he'll eventually believe it. He never does, of course. That's the tragedy. 30 years of pretending to be his brother, and Stan still sees himself as the screw-up. Still sees himself as the one who ruined everything. Still hears his father's voice telling him he's not enough. And that self-image is so deeply embedded that when the moment comes to save the world in the series finale, his first instinct is to offer himself up as the expendable one. Because in Stan's mind, he's always been expendable. Let's get into the second half of Season 2, because this is where the show starts putting real pressure on Stan's philosophy and forcing him to confront its limitations. After Ford returns through the portal in Not What He Seems, Stan expects, I don't know what he expects, gratitude maybe? Acknowledgement? After 30 years of working to bring his brother back, surely Ford would see what Stan sacrificed and say thank you. But Ford doesn't say thank you. Ford punches him in the face. And look, Ford has his reasons. The portal could have destroyed the universe. Stan stole his identity. There's a whole list of grievances that Ford is working through. And the show, to its credit, doesn't make Ford a villain for being angry. Ford is a flawed, complicated character with his own wounds and his own blind spots. But from Stan's perspective, from the perspective of a man who spent 30 years alone in a basement, working every night to save his brother, that punch must feel like the worst confirmation of his deepest fear. That no matter what he does, no matter how much he sacrifices, it's never going to be enough. He's never going to be enough. And this is where the Stanchurian candidate becomes really important. Season 2, Episode 14, aired August 24th, 2015. Stan decides to run for mayor of Gravity Falls, and the stated reason is that he wants to be respected. He wants to prove that he's more than just a con man. But the real reason, the one the show reveals at the end, is that he wants the twins' respect. He overhears Dipper and Mabel talking about how great it would be if Ford ran for mayor, and it breaks him, because it confirms what he's always feared, that given the choice between the two Pines brothers, everyone will pick Ford. The episode is funny. Stan's campaign is a disaster. His unfiltered honesty during a radio interview tanks his approval rating. The kids end up using a mind control tie that Ford invented to puppet Stan through his speeches. And on one level, It's a comedy episode. But underneath it, there's this aching sadness. Stan doesn't want to be mayor. He doesn't care about politics or governance or civic responsibility. He wants someone, anyone, to look at him and say, "You matter." He wants to hear the words that Philbrick never said. But before we get to the conclusion of that episode, I want to talk about something else that's happening in this stretch of Season 2, because it's crucial to understanding the full scope of Stan's emotional landscape. Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons, Season 2, Episode 13, aired August 3rd, 2015, is an episode that's often discussed in terms of the Dipper-Ford relationship, but it's just as important for what it reveals about Stan. In that episode, Dipper and Ford are bonding over a tabletop role-playing game. They're geeking out. They're in their element. Two intellectuals finding each other and having the time of their lives, and Stan is on the outside, watching. He and Mabel are trying to watch the season finale of a show called Ducktective, which, let's be honest, is one of the best recurring jokes in the whole series. And Ford and Dipper are taking up the whole living room with their game, and Stan gets angry, genuinely angry, not in the comedic, blustery way, in the quiet, resentful, actually wounded way, because what he's seeing isn't two people playing a game. It's his brother taking his kid. Ford is giving Dipper the kind of intellectual mentorship that Stan could never provide. Ford is speaking Dipper's language in a way that Stan can't. And Stan feels replaced, irrelevant, pushed aside, just like he was when they were kids, when Ford was the one with the science fair project, and Stan was the one with the footbot. And there's this moment where Stan tells Dipper that Ford is dangerous, that he should stay away from him. And on the surface, it looks like jealousy. It looks petty. But there's something else underneath it. Something the show doesn't spell out, but trusts you to see. Stan knows what happens when you get too close to Ford Pines. He knows what happens when you build your world around a man who is brilliant and driven, and careless with other people's hearts. Stan is the world's foremost expert on the collateral damage of Stanford Pine's genius. And when he tells Dipper to be careful, he's not being petty. He's being protective, in the only way he knows how. The episode also has this incredible argument between Stan and Ford about who gets to use the living room, which is simultaneously the dumbest and the most meaningful argument in the entire show, because it's not about the living room. It's about territory. It's about space. It's about who gets to be present in this family and whose presence matters. Ford came back from another dimension and immediately started claiming space. The basement, Dipper's attention, the role of the smart one, the hero. And Stan, who held down the fort for 30 years, who kept the shack running, who raised Seuss and looked after the kids and lied to the government and rebuilt the portal alone. Stan feels like he's being erased from his own home. And that connects to something I want to highlight about the deal Stan and Ford make at the end of A Tale of Two Stans. Ford agrees to live in the basement for the summer to repair damage from the portal. But there's a condition. Once summer is over, Stan has to leave. He has to give up the shack. He has to give up the name, Stanford. He has to go back to being nothing. And I want to pause here and talk about one of the most underrated Stan episodes in the entire show, because I think it captures a crucial moment in his philosophical evolution. The Last Mabelcorn, Season 2, Episode 15, aired September 7th, 2015, is primarily Mabel's episode. She has to get unicorn hair to protect the Mystery Shack from Bill's cipher. But there's a B-plot in this episode where Dipper discovers, through Ford's research, that Bill once had a direct connection to Ford's mind. And there's a scene where Ford explicitly warns about how Bill operates, through flattery, through deals, through exploiting people's weaknesses and insecurities. And here's what's relevant to Stan's story. Ford describes Bill as a con man, a confidence trickster, someone who gains your trust and then uses it against you. And Ford says, almost offhandedly, that Stan, as a fellow scammer, would have seen through Bill immediately, would have recognized the pattern, because it takes one to know one. That line is throwaway in the moment, but it's foreshadowing the entire finale, because that's exactly what happened. Stan recognizes that Bill is running a con, and he runs a better one. The con man outdoes the cosmic con man. The screw-up twin outplays the trillion-year-old demon. And he does it not with Ford's intelligence, not with some magical weapon, not with any special power. He does it with the skills he learned on the road. The skills he developed during a decade of failed businesses and getting kicked out of states and running scams. The skills his father would have sneered at. The skills the world told him were worthless. Every terrible thing that happened to Stan, every failure, every arrest, every humiliation, gave him the exact set of tools he needed to save the world. The show is saying, nothing is wasted. No experience is meaningless. The darkest chapters of your life might turn out to be the training montage for your greatest moment. And honestly, that's the kind of message that makes me want to stand up and applaud. Because it's not easy, it's not tidy. It doesn't pretend that suffering is noble or that everything happens for a reason. It just says, the things you survived made you strong in ways you don't even realize yet. And when the moment comes, if the moment comes, those strengths will be there, ready. And let me bring up one more episode that I think is essential to understanding Stan in the second half of Season 2. Roadside Attraction, Season 2, Episode 16, aired September 21st, 2015. This is the episode where Stan takes the kids on a road trip to sabotage other tourist traps across Oregon. And it's a fun, relatively lighthearted episode on the surface. Stan and the kids drive around the state, vandalizing competitor roadside attractions, having a good time. It's classic Stan, petty, illegal, weirdly wholesome. But there's a subplot in this episode that reveals something important about Stan's inner life. Stan meets a woman named Darlene at one of the tourist traps. He's charming, he's flirtatious, he's doing his thing. And for a moment, it looks like Stan might actually be connecting with someone romantically for the first time in the series. And then, Darlene turns out to be a spider person who wants to eat him. And you could read that as just a funny gag, which it is. But you could also read it as the show's most explicit statement about Stan's relationship with intimacy. Every time Stan opens up, even a little, he gets bitten, literally, in this case. The universe keeps confirming his worldview. Trust is dangerous. Vulnerability is a trap. The moment you let your guard down, something with fangs shows up. And yet, by the end of the episode, Stan isn't more guarded. He's not more closed off. He's actually a little more open. The spider incident is a setback, not a defeat. And I think that's because of the kids. Their presence in his life has gradually, imperceptibly shifted his baseline. He's still cynical. He's still guarded. But his default setting has moved from trust no one ever to trust cautiously, because some people are worth the risk. And that shift, tiny as it seems, is enormous for a character who spent decades building walls. There's also a moment in Roadside Attraction where Stan gives Dipper advice about talking to girls, and the advice is terrible. It's vintage Stan, sleazy, outdated, based on manipulation rather than genuine connection. But the fact that he's giving it at all is significant, because it means he cares about Dipper's happiness. He wants Dipper to succeed in areas where Stan himself has failed. And the episode ends with a tacit acknowledgement that Stan's approach doesn't work. Dipper's attempt to use Stan's techniques backfires spectacularly. But the care behind the bad advice was real. And I think that captures something essential about Stan as a mentor figure. He's not a good teacher. His methods are wrong. His advice is bad. But his intentions are genuine. He wants these kids to be happy and safe and strong. And he's trying to help them get there with the only tools he has. And sometimes those tools are rusty and broken and counterproductive. But the effort matters. The love behind the broken tools matters. The kids overhear this, or at least Mabel does. And there's this heartbreaking moment where she worries that she and Dipper will end up like Stan and Ford when they're older. Two siblings torn apart by resentment and stubbornness and the inability to forgive. And Dipper assures her they won't. But the fear is real, because the show has shown us that love isn't enough. Love isn't a shield against bitterness. Stan and Ford love each other. That's never in question. The problem isn't love. The problem is pride. The problem is pain that's been carried for so long, it's become load-bearing. You can't remove it without the whole structure collapsing. And that's exactly what happens in the finale. The structure collapses. Stan's mind collapses. And what emerges from the rubble is something simpler, something smaller, something truer. A man who doesn't remember his pride, who doesn't remember his pain, who, when the memories come back, comes back without the armor. I know I keep coming back to this image of armor, but I think it's the right metaphor. Stan's entire personality is armor. The gruffness, the cynicism, the fez, the 8-ball cane, the Mr. Mystery persona. It's all protection. Every layer of it was added in response to some wound. The gruffness comes from Philbrick. The cynicism comes from a decade of failed businesses. The fake identity comes from the loss of his brother. Layer upon layer upon layer, until the real Stanley Pines is buried so deep that even he might not be able to find himself. And the memory gun strips it all away. Every layer, every defense, every wall. It takes everything Stan has built, all of it. The good and the bad, the lies and the truths, the pain and the love, and reduces him to nothing. And then Mabel's scrapbook builds him back up. But the version that comes back is lighter. The armor doesn't fully reform. Some of it comes back, because that's who Stan is. That's the person his experience is made. But it's thinner now. There are gaps. And through those gaps, you can see the kid from Glass Shard Beach who just wanted his brother to come sailing with him. And at the end of the episode, after the whole mayoral race falls apart, Stan admits it. He tells the kids that he doesn't need to be mayor. He just wants them to think of him as someone important. And Mabel gives him a mayoral sash that she knitted herself. And it's this small, silly, completely insufficient gesture that somehow means everything. Because it's not about the sash. It's about Mabel seeing Stan for who he really is. Not Stanford the genius, not Mr. Mystery the tourist trap owner, but Stanley, the uncle who cares too much and shows it too little, and choosing him anyway. I think about this episode a lot, honestly. It's not one of the big dramatic ones. It doesn't have the emotional punch of Not What He Seems or the world-ending stakes of Weirdmageddon, but it's the episode that shows you, most clearly, what Stan actually wants. Not money, not fame, not power, validation. The simple, fundamental human need to be told that you're worth something, that you matter, that you're not a mistake. And the fact that Stan can't come right out and say this, that he has to filter it through a mayoral campaign and a bet and a joke and 17 layers of bluster, tells you everything about the depth of his pain. He's been carrying this wound for so long that he can't even look at it directly. He has to approach it sideways, through schemes and distractions and false bravado. Because looking at it directly, admitting that he's been desperate for approval his entire life, would mean admitting that his father's rejection broke something in him that never healed. And you know what's funny is, the show gives you this insight and then immediately moves on. That's life, right? You have this moment of vulnerability, this flash of emotional truth, and then the next day you're back to running scams and yelling at tourists. The wound doesn't close just because you acknowledged it. Stan doesn't become a different person because he admitted he wants the kids' respect. He goes right back to being Stan. But now you know what's underneath. And it changes how you see everything he does after that. Alright, let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about the finale. But before I get to the sacrifice itself, I want to talk about something that happens earlier in the Weirdmageddon arc that I think is really important for understanding Stan's philosophy. It's easy to overlook because it's not dramatic in the same way the sacrifice is, but I think it's actually more revealing. When Weirdmageddon begins, when Bill Cipher rips through the dimensional barrier and turns Gravity Falls into a nightmare, the first thing most people do is panic. Understandable. The sky is on fire. Reality is unraveling. Eyeball bats are turning people to stone. It's the literal apocalypse. And Ford, the genius, the hero, the six-fingered savior everyone's been waiting for, Ford tries to fight Bill head-on. He charges in with a gun that he thinks can stop the demon, and he fails immediately. He gets captured, turned into a golden statue. The genius strategy doesn't work. And Stan? What does Stan do? Stan runs. He grabs whoever he can find, and he runs to the mystery shack. He holes up inside the unicorn hair barrier that Ford set up around the building. He takes in the surviving townspeople. He takes in the supernatural creatures. He shares his food. He keeps people safe. He does what he's always done. He survives. And he makes sure the people around him survive too. And here's what's profound about that. Ford's approach to the crisis is heroic in the traditional sense. Charge the bad guy. Use your brilliance. Be the savior. And it fails. Stan's approach is unheroic in every traditional sense. Hide, conserve resources, protect the people you can reach. And it works. The shack becomes the last safe place in Gravity Falls. Not because of Stan's genius, not because of his bravery, because of his pragmatism, because of the survival instincts he's been building his entire life, because the same philosophy that makes him frustrating in everyday life, the cynicism, the paranoia, the unwillingness to take stupid risks, makes him exactly the right person to lead people through a disaster. The show even gives him a little scene where he declares himself chief of Gravity Falls, since Mayor Tyler has been turned to stone. And it's played for laughs, of course. Stan taking advantage of the apocalypse for a minor power grab is very on brand, but it also works. He actually leads. He rations food. He organizes people. He makes decisions. And nobody dies on his watch. I think this is one of those episodes I think about randomly at like 2 a.m. because it poses this really interesting question. What makes someone a leader? Ford is smarter, braver, more experience, but Stan is the one who keeps people alive. Ford is the guy with the plan to defeat Bill. Stan is the guy who makes sure there are still people left to care whether Bill is defeated. And that distinction between the flashy, obvious heroism and the quiet, unglamorous kind is at the heart of Stan's whole character arc. He's never going to be the genius. He's never going to be the one with the plan. But he's the one who stays. He's the one who holds things together when everything is falling apart. And in the end, that matters just as much. Maybe more. There's also a moment in Weirdmageddon where Dipper tries to convince Stan that they need to go rescue Ford instead of hiding in the shack. And Stan resists. Not because he doesn't care about Ford, but because he's weighing the risk. If they leave the shack, the survivors could die. If they fail, everyone loses. Stan is doing the cold, pragmatic calculus that he's been doing his whole life, and the show doesn't frame him as wrong for doing it. It frames him as cautious, as realistic, as someone whose experience of loss has taught him to protect what he has instead of gambling it on what he might get. But then Dipper says the magic words. Ford knows Bill's weakness, and Stan changes his mind. Not because the risk went away, but because now there's a chance, a real chance. And Stan is, at his core, a gambler. He's been gambling his whole life. He gambled on the portal. He gambled on assuming Ford's identity. He gambled on the shack. And every gamble came with the potential for total loss. But Stan takes them anyway, because underneath the pragmatism, underneath the cynicism, there's this stubborn, almost irrational hope. The same hope that kept him working in that basement for 30 years. The hope that says, maybe this time it'll be enough. And so the Mystery Shack crew builds a robot. Old Man McGucket leads the engineering. Because of course, the town crazy person turns out to be a mechanical genius when you actually listen to him. Which is another one of the show's themes, that the people society dismisses are often the ones who save it. They turn the shack into a giant mech, the Shacktron, and they charge into battle. And there's this shot, when the Shacktron punches Bill in the eye. One of Bill's actual eyes gets torn out of his socket by the robot punch, and Stan is in there, in the cockpit, cheering. He's not scared. He's not calculating odds. He's alive. He's fighting. For the first time since Ford came back, Stan isn't trying to prove anything. He's not trying to be smarter, or more useful, or more worthy. He's just doing what needs to be done. And I think that's the moment where his philosophy fully crystallizes. Not the sacrifice. That comes later. This moment. The moment where Stan stops trying to earn his place and just takes it. Now let me get to the sacrifice itself. Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls. Season 2, Episode 20. The 40th and final episode of Gravity Falls. It aired on February 15th, 2016. Exactly 4 years after Boss Mabel, weirdly enough, on Disney XD. It was a 44-minute special. It was watched by 2.47 million viewers, making it the most watched telecast in Disney XD history. And it contains, in my opinion, the single greatest character moment in the history of Western animation. I'm not being hyperbolic. I've thought about this a lot. I've watched a lot of animation, and I genuinely believe that what Stan does in the finale of Gravity Falls is the most earned, the most thematically complete, the most emotionally devastating act of heroism I've ever seen in a cartoon. So here's what happens. Bill Cipher has taken over Gravity Falls. Reality is collapsing. The townspeople have been turned into stone, arranged into a throne for Bill. Ford has been captured and is being tortured for information about how to break the barrier that's keeping Bill trapped in Gravity Falls. And the Mystery Shack crew, Stan, the kids, Seuss, Wendy, and a ragtag army of townsfolk and supernatural creatures has turned the shack into a giant robot to fight back. The battle is incredible. The Shacktron punches Bill in the eye. The kids infiltrate the pyramid. They free the townspeople. They find Ford. And Ford reveals that there's a way to stop Bill. A zodiac wheel that requires 10 specific people, each associated with a symbol, to join hands and channel their power against him. And it almost works. They gather the 10 people. They start the ritual. But then Stan and Ford get into a fight about Stan's name, about the deed to the Mystery Shack, about their lifelong inability to get along for 5 seconds without it devolving into petty bickering. And the circle breaks, and Bill returns. And I need you to think about the cruelty of that moment. The world is ending. Literal apocalypse. And these two old men can't stop fighting about who ruined whose science project 40 years ago. The pettiness of it is almost absurd, and that's the point. The show is telling you that the Pines brothers' conflict isn't just a personal drama. It's a genuine threat to the world. Their inability to forgive each other, to move past their pain, to let go of their pride, almost costs everyone everything. And this is where the show pulls its masterstroke. Because after the Zodiac fails, Ford gets captured again. Bill wants to get inside Ford's mind to learn how to break the barrier. But there's a rule in the mindscape. Bill can only enter someone's mind if they agree to let him in. They have to shake his hand. They have to make a deal. And Ford refuses. So Bill does something monstrous. He tells Ford that if he doesn't cooperate, Bill is going to kill one of the kids, Dipper or Mabel, just for fun, just because he can. And that's when Stan steps in. Stan tells Ford to let Bill in. And Ford says, "Are you insane?" And Stan says, "Trust me." And here's what happens. Ford agrees to Bill's deal. He shakes Bill's hand. Bill enters his mind. But it's not Ford's mind. It's Stan's. They've switched places. Stan is wearing Ford's clothes. Ford is wearing Stan's fez. They planned it. And Bill, too giddy, too arrogant, too eager to notice that the mind he's entering doesn't belong to the genius, but to the con man, walks right into the trap. And once Bill is inside Stan's mind, Ford fires the memory gun, the same memory-erasing gun from the Society of the Blind Eye, aimed at Stan, erasing everything, every memory, every thought, every experience, every moment of Stan's life, good and bad, being consumed by blue fire. And Bill screams. He offers Stan everything: money, fame, riches, infinite power, his own galaxy, everything Stan has ever wanted. Or at least, everything Stan has ever claimed to want. And Stan doesn't flinch, because here, at the very end, Stan's philosophy reveals its final, truest form. All those years of saying money is what matters? A lie. All those years of hoarding cash and running scams and seeing people as wallets? A costume, a character, a survival mechanism built by a scared kid who got kicked out of his house and never stopped trying to prove he was worth something. The truth is simpler. The truth is what Stan says to Bill as the fire closes in. You're a real wise guy, but you made one fatal mistake. You messed with my family. That's it. That's the whole philosophy of Grunkle Stan, stripped of every defense mechanism and every lie and every layer of armor. Family. That's what matters. That's what's always mattered. Not money, not respect, not proving his father wrong. Family. The kids. Ford. The people who showed him that he was worth something even when he couldn't believe it himself. And then he punches Bill in the face. And Bill shatters. And the blue fire consumes everything. And Stanley pines, the man who couldn't say, please. The man who thought he was worthless. The man who spent his entire life hiding behind a stolen name and a fake tourist trap and a philosophy of cynicism he never actually believed. That man saves the world. And he doesn't remember any of it. That's the cruelest, most beautiful thing Gravity Falls ever does. Stan doesn't get to enjoy his victory. He doesn't get to bask in it. He wakes up in the ruins of Gravity Falls with no memory of who he is, who the kids are, who his brother is, or what he just did. The man who gave everything doesn't even get to know that he gave it. He's just empty. A blank slate sitting on the ground while Mabel desperately tries to remind him who he is. And I need to talk about what happens next, because it's the part that actually makes me emotional every time. Mabel pulls out her scrapbook, the one she's been keeping all summer, full of photos and stickers and silly memories. And she starts showing it to Stan, page by page, memory by memory. This is you. This is us. This is what we did together. This is who you are. And slowly, not magically, not instantly, but slowly, Stan's memories start coming back, triggered not by some scientific device or supernatural power, but by a 12-year-old girl's scrapbook, by the evidence of love, by the physical, tangible proof that he mattered to someone. And I want to sit with that for a moment, because the show is making a very specific philosophical claim here. And it's easy to miss if you're caught up in the emotion. The claim is this: identity is not just what you remember, it's what you meant to other people. Stan's memories are gone. His internal sense of self is wiped clean. But the external evidence of who he was, the photos, the stickers, Mabel's scrapbook, the stories his family tells him, that evidence is enough to bring him back. He's reconstructed not from the inside out, but from the outside in. Other people's memories of him become the foundation for his new self, and that's a direct refutation of Stan's lifelong philosophy. Stan always believed he had to do everything himself. He had to earn his own value. He had to build his own identity. He had to be self-sufficient, self-made, self-reliant. And in the end, none of that matters. What saves him, what literally rebuilds his consciousness, is the fact that other people loved him. The connections he spent his whole life being afraid of. The vulnerability he spent his whole life avoiding. That's what brings him back from nothing. There's also something beautifully ironic about the memory gun, if you think about it. The Society of the Blind Eye used that gun throughout the series to erase the townspeople's memories of the supernatural. It was a tool of willful ignorance, of running away from uncomfortable truth. And in the finale, Stan uses it, or rather, has it used on him as a weapon. He weaponizes forgetting. He turns amnesia into a sword. The thing that was used to make people weaker, to make them blind, becomes the thing that destroys Bill. And Stan's willingness to lose everything, to become the blank, the erased, the forgotten, is what makes it possible. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of something Ford says earlier in the show, about how Stan, as a fellow scammer, would have seen Bill for the con man he was. And that's exactly what happens. Stan doesn't defeat Bill with intelligence or magic or special powers. He defeats him with a con, the greatest con he's ever pulled. He convinces Bill that he's Ford. He sells the deception so perfectly that a trillion-year-old interdimensional demon doesn't catch the switch. And then, once Bill is in his head, Stan reveals the trap. It's a con. The whole thing is a con. And the weapon he uses is the same one he's been using his entire life, making people believe something that isn't true. The difference is that, this time, the con isn't for money, or survival, or self-protection. It's for everyone. It's the ultimate expression of Stan's skill set. The lying, the deception, the quick thinking, the audacity, turned toward a completely selfless purpose. The show is saying, the things about Stan that seemed like weaknesses, his dishonesty, his trickery, his willingness to play dirty, those are the things that save the world. Not despite being flaws, because they're flaws that a good person deployed in the right way at the right time. And I think about Ford's reaction to all of this, because Ford is standing there with the memory gun, and Stan has just told him the plan, and Ford has to pull the trigger. Ford, the brother who punched Stan when he came back through the portal, the brother who spent decades resenting Stan for one dumb mistake. Ford has to be the one who erases his brother's mind. And the show doesn't shy away from how devastating that is. Ford doesn't fire the gun with confidence or resolve. He fires it reluctantly, with tears, because he knows what it costs, and he knows that Stan is the one paying. Journal 3, the real-life book that Alex Hirsch co-authored, released July 26, 2016, debuting at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, fills in some of what happened after. Ford was tireless in helping Stan recover. He found old videos of them as kids. He recounted their adventures, and he apologized, tearfully, for decades of bitterness, for what he calls one dumb mistake. Not Stan's mistake, the science fair, Ford's mistake, the decades of resentment that followed. That reversal is important, because for the entire show, we've been led to believe that Stan is the one who needs to apologize. Stan broke the machine. Stan ruined Ford's chances. Stan caused the rift. But Journal 3 says, no, Ford is the one who apologizes. Because Ford is the one who held on to anger for 40 years over something that didn't even ruin his life. Ford went to college. Ford got his grant. Ford studied anomalies. Ford built the portal. The science fair incident was a speed bump in Ford's career, but it was a cliff in their relationship. And Ford was the one who kept pushing Stan toward the edge. And that's not me saying Ford is a bad person. Ford is a complicated, damaged, brilliant, deeply flawed man, just like Stan. They're mirror images of each other. Ford hides behind intelligence, the way Stan hides behind cynicism. Ford pushes people away because he thinks he doesn't need them. Stan pushes people away because he thinks he doesn't deserve them. And in the end, they both learn the same lesson. You can't do it alone. You were never supposed to do it alone. The whole point is having someone next to you. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a light video. And I keep coming back to this point, but I think it's the key to everything. Gravity Falls is not just a show about mystery and magic. It's a show about what happens when someone who's been told their entire life that they're worthless discovers that they're not. And it communicates that message not through speeches or lessons, but through the story of one man and the family he didn't think he deserved. And here's what I love about the ending. The show doesn't cure Stan. His memories come back, mostly, but we don't know if he gets everything. The trauma isn't erased. The 30 years of isolation aren't undone. Philbrick's rejection isn't forgotten. The show acknowledges that you can't undo a lifetime of pain with one act of heroism, but you can choose what to do with it. You can choose to let it define you, or you can choose to be something more. And Stan chooses more. In the final scenes of the series, Stan and Ford agree to live out their childhood dream. They get on a boat, the Stan of War II, and they sail into the Arctic to explore the world, together, as brothers, as equals, the genius and the screw-up, side by side, finally doing the thing they dreamed about when they were kids in Glass Shard Beach. Stan promotes Seuss to manager of the Mystery Shack, and there's something so perfect about that, because Seuss is the person Stan never was, uncomplicated, good-hearted, generous, unafraid to be vulnerable. And by handing him the shack, Stan is acknowledging that there's a better way to run the place than his way. That kindness and openness are strengths, not weaknesses. That you don't have to be a con man to survive. And the last day of summer arrives, and Dipper and Mabel have to leave. And Stan does what Stan always does. He tries to hide his emotions. He tells them to get on the bus. He acts like it's no big deal. But then Waddles appears, and the bus driver won't let the pig on board. And Stan, the man who claims to care only about money, the man who has complained about Waddles all summer, steps up and threatens the bus driver. He and Ford, side by side, telling this bus driver that the pig is staying. It's such a small moment, but it's everything. It's Stan's philosophy in its final, evolved form. Not the world is harsh and you have to be hard. Not trust is for suckers. Not money is all that matters. But these are my people, and you're not going to hurt them. Not on my watch. And I want to stay with this scene a little longer, because there's a detail here that's easy to miss, and it wrecks me every time. When Dipper and Mabel get on the bus, Stan tries to say goodbye, and he can't. He starts to speak, and he chokes up, and he covers it by telling them he lived with Waddles all summer, and their parents will just have to deal with it. He converts emotion into complaint. He translates love into grumbling. Even in this final, evolved version of himself, Stan can't quite get the words out. He can't quite say what he means, and Mabel doesn't need him to. She says, "We'll miss you too, Grunkle Stan." She hears what he's not saying. She always has. And that's the beauty of their relationship. Mabel is Stan's translator. She takes his gruff, coded, sideways expressions of love and converts them into the plain language that everyone else can understand. She's been doing this the whole show, and in the final scene, she does it one last time. Let me talk about the Stan-O-War 2 for a moment, because I think it deserves more attention than it usually gets. At the end of the series, Stan and Ford sail off together on a boat named after the decrepit vessel they found as kids on the beach in Glass Shard Beach. The original Stan-O-War was a wrecked boat that two little boys claimed as their own and dreamed about sailing around the world in. It was the physical embodiment of their childhood dream, the last innocent wish before everything went wrong. And now, they're doing it. 40 years late. After everything that happened, the science fair, the rejection, the portal, 30 years of separation, an interdimensional apocalypse, a memory wipe, they're doing the thing they said they'd do when they were 10. And the show doesn't make a big speech about it. It just shows them, on the boat, together, fighting a giant squid in the Arctic, laughing. And I think that image, two old men, gray-haired and scarred, and carrying the weight of 40 years of missed time, finally doing the thing they dreamed about as children, is one of the most hopeful images in the entire show. Not because it says the pain didn't happen, it obviously happened, but because it says the dream survived. Through everything, through all of it. The dream of being together, of being brothers, of sailing into the unknown side by side. That dream was tougher than the pain. It outlasted the resentment. It outlasted the separation. It outlasted even the erasure of Stan's mind. Because when you come right down to it, the dream was never about the boat. It was about the person next to you in the boat. And that person came back. They both came back. There's a scene in Dipper's final voiceover where you see Stan and Ford on the Stan-O-War 2, and they've just defeated this massive squid creature, and they're high-fiving and laughing. And I keep thinking about how different that image is from the one we started with. The Stan we met in episode 1 was alone, sitting in a chair, watching TV, eating chips out of a bag, isolated by choice, but also by circumstance, by the walls he'd built, by the lies he'd told, by the identity he'd stolen. And the Stan we leave in the finale is on a boat with his brother, exploring the world, fighting monsters, living the adventure he was always meant to live. And yeah, he's still grumpy about it. He's still complaining. He's still Stan. But the walls are down. Not all of them. You don't dismantle 60 years of emotional armor in one summer. But the important ones. The ones that kept him from his brother. The ones that kept him from admitting he cared. The ones that made him lie awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if he was worth anything. Those walls have cracks now. And through the cracks, light gets in. I want to say one more thing about the legacy of this character, because I think it matters. Gravity Falls ended in 2016. As of now, it's been a decade since the show concluded, and Stan Pines is still, by almost any measure, one of the most beloved animated characters of the 21st century. The fan community is enormous and active. People are still making art of him, still writing essays about him, still cosplaying as him, still naming their pets after him. The Gravity Falls subreddit is thriving. The fandom events continue, and a huge part of that lasting power comes from Stan. And I think the reason is simple. Stan feels real. In a medium full of archetypes and tropes and characters designed to sell merchandise, Stan feels like someone you've actually met. He's not aspirational. He's not a role model. He's not the person you want to be when you grow up. He's the person you recognize. The uncle at Thanksgiving who never takes off his sunglasses and always has a scheme and always has your back, even though he'll never say so. The grandfather who can't say I love you, but who drove to your school play in a snowstorm because he heard you had a solo. The person who fills the room with noise and jokes and complaints, and underneath all of it, fills it with presence, with caring, with the stubborn, wordless, inarticulate declaration that they are here, they are staying, and they will fight whatever needs fighting. That's Stan Pine. That's the philosophy of Grunkle Stan. He doesn't have a system. He doesn't have a creed. He has a fez and a cane and a secret basement and a heart so full of love that it had to be buried under 30 years of lies just to keep it from breaking. And then the kids came, and the lies cracked, and the love came through, and then the kids leave, and Stan watches the bus drive away, and he tries so hard not to show that he's sad. And Mabel calls out, "We'll miss you too, Grunkle Stan." And it's not a grand speech. It's 6 words, not a dramatic declaration. It's 6 words from a 13-year-old girl who sees right through him, who has always seen right through him, who loved him before he could love himself. I want to take a moment here to acknowledge something about the real-world context of this character. Alex Hirsch ended Gravity Falls on his own terms. He announced on November 20th, 2015, that the series would conclude with its 2nd season, writing on his blog that the show isn't being canceled, it's being finished. Gravity Falls ran for 40 episodes across 2 seasons, from June 15th, 2012 to February 15th, 2016. And in that relatively short run, it created one of the most complete character arcs in animation history. And I think the completeness is the key. A lot of shows run long enough that their characters' arcs get stretched, diluted, reversed, retconned. Characters who learned lessons in Season 2 forget them by Season 5. Villains get redeemed, and then unredeemed. Growth gets undone because the show needs to keep going. But Gravity Falls doesn't have that problem. It's 40 episodes, 2 seasons, 1 summer, and every single piece of Stan's arc, from the vending machine in Episode 1 to the punch in the mindscape in Episode 40, is connected. There's no filler. There's no backtracking. It's one continuous, coherent story about a man learning that he matters. Hirsch has said that he always wanted Gravity Falls to be a finite series. 1 summer, 1 story, beginning, middle, end. And the discipline of that, the willingness to say, this is enough, this is where it ends, is what makes Stan's arc so powerful. The show doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't dilute its message. It tells the story it came to tell, and then it lets go. Which, if you think about it, is something Stan himself has to learn. The ability to let go, to release control, to trust that the things you've built will survive without you. Hirsch went on to co-author Gravity Falls, Journal 3, which was released on July 26, 2016, and debuted as a #1 New York Times bestseller. The book stayed on the list for 47 weeks. As of 2024, it sold over 1.3 million copies. He also released Gravity Falls, Lost Legends in 2018 and The Book of Bill in 2024, both of which expanded the Gravity Falls universe. And The Cipher Hunt, a worldwide treasure hunt Hirsch organized in the summer of 2016, where fans searched for a real statue of Bill Cipher hidden in Oregon, became one of the most elaborate and beloved community events in fandom history. The statue was eventually found in Reedsport, Oregon, after 2 weeks of global puzzle solving. And Journal 3 includes additional material about Ford's perspective on Stan's sacrifice, including passages where Ford describes how he was tireless in helping with Stan's memory recovery, finding old videos of their childhood, and tearfully apologizing for mistakes he'd made, including the decades of bitterness over what he eventually calls one dumb mistake. That detail, from the journal, not the show, is significant because it shows that even after the cameras stopped rolling, the redemption continued. Ford came around. The relationship healed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. And that's such a realistic, respectful way to handle it. Not a fairy tale ending where all wounds close and all pain disappears, but a messy, human ending where people do their best and it's enough. There's one more thing I want to address before we wrap up, And it's something that I think puts Stan's entire philosophy into its proper context. Let's talk about the theme of Gravity Falls as a whole, and where Stan fits into it. At its core, Gravity Falls is a show about the tension between mystery and connection. Dipper represents the drive to solve mysteries, to find answers, to know. Mabel represents the drive to connect, to belong, to love. And the show argues, consistently, that both drives are necessary and that neither is sufficient on its own. Dipper's obsession with answers almost costs him his family in Dipper and Mabel versus the Future. Mabel's need for connection makes her vulnerable to Bill's manipulation. You need both. You need to be smart and you need to be kind. You need to think and you need to feel. And Stan is the character who embodies the failure mode of choosing neither. He's not particularly driven by curiosity. He actively discourages Dipper from investigating the supernatural. And he's not particularly driven by connection. He pushes away everyone who tries to get close. Stan's philosophy, as it exists for most of the series, is essentially don't ask questions and don't let people in. Survive, endure, protect yourself. That's it. And the show spends 2 seasons dismantling that philosophy. Not by proving it wrong in some abstract way, but by showing Stan, over and over, that the people he's trying to protect himself from are the same people he can't live without. That the vulnerability he's afraid of is the same vulnerability that heals him. That the questions he doesn't want to ask, who am I without the act? Am I worth loving? Can I trust anyone? Are the questions that, when he finally answers them, set him free. And the answers, when they come, aren't elegant. They're messy and imperfect, and delivered in the worst possible circumstances. Stan doesn't have a beautifully scripted epiphany where he realizes the error of his ways. He says please while pinned to a wall during a gravitational anomaly. He says trust me while swapping identities with his brother in front of a demon. He punches that demon in the face while his mind is literally on fire. Stan's enlightenment, if you can call it that, comes not through reflection, but through crisis, through being pushed so far past his comfort zone that the only option left is the truth. And maybe that's the most honest thing about Stan's story. Growth doesn't usually come from sitting down and thinking things through. It comes from being thrown into a situation where your usual defenses don't work, where the script you've been reading from your whole life suddenly has no lines for this scene, and you have to improvise. You have to reach past the armor and find the real thing underneath. And the real thing might be messy and ineloquent and scared, but it's there. It was always there. You just needed a reason to dig it out. Let me also say something about what Stan represents in the broader landscape of animated characters, because I think it's worth noting how unusual he is. Most animated shows aimed at younger audiences feature characters who are fundamentally good from the start and become slightly better over time. The hero starts nice and ends nicer. The journey is about learning one specific lesson, confidence, or teamwork, or believing in yourself, and then the character is fixed. Stan breaks that model completely. He's not fundamentally good at the start. He's fundamentally complicated. He's a criminal. He's a liar. He's greedy. He's emotionally unavailable. He's the kind of person that, in real life, most of us would struggle to like. And the show doesn't sand down those edges. It doesn't pretend that Stan's flaws are secretly virtues. It says, these are real flaws. They cause real harm, but they exist alongside real love, real courage, real sacrifice. And the measure of a person isn't whether they're perfect. It's whether, when the moment comes, they choose the right thing, even though it costs them everything. That's a message that I think a lot of adults need to hear. Never mind kids. The world is full of people who've done bad things and good things and complicated things. And the question of how to evaluate a whole person, their full ledger, their complete story, is one of the hardest questions there is. Gravity Falls doesn't pretend it has a simple answer. It just shows you one man's ledger, in full, and says, you decide. But look at what he built. Look at what he saved. Look at who loved him. And look at what he was willing to give up. If you're still here, if you're still listening, I want to leave you with one last thought about the philosophy of Grunkle Stan. I think the reason this character resonates so deeply with so many people is because his story answers one of the hardest questions a person can ask. What do you do when the world tells you you're worthless? What do you do when the people who are supposed to love you decide you're not enough? And Stan's answer, the one he arrives at by the end of the series, is this: you love anyway. You show up anyway. You keep going anyway. Not because the world will reward you for it. Not because it'll be easy. Not because it'll fix you. But because the people you love are worth it. even if you're not sure you are. That's the philosophy of Grunkle Stan. It's not optimism, it's not cynicism. It's something harder and rarer and more beautiful than either. It's stubborn, imperfect, terrified, inarticulate, deeply flawed love. The kind that comes from someone who doesn't believe he deserves to give it. The kind that makes you drive 30 years through the dark because you think there might be a light at the end of it. The kind that makes you say, please, for the first time in your life when everything is on the line. The kind that makes you punch a demon in the face while your own mind burns around you. It's the kind of love that doesn't have a speech. It doesn't have a grand gesture. It has a man in boxer shorts, making fishing hats, hoping someone will get in the boat. I think about Stan a lot. More than I should, probably, for a cartoon character. But there's something about him that sticks with me in a way that more sophisticated characters don't. Maybe it's because I know people like him. Maybe we all do. The gruff uncle, the emotionally unavailable parent. The friend who'll drive across the country for you, but can't say, I care about you, out loud. The person who hides everything tender behind a wall of jokes and toughness, because somewhere, at some point, someone taught them that softness was danger. Gravity Falls says, that's okay. You're still worth something. You're still capable of heroism. You're still capable of love, even if you can't say it, even if you show it wrong, even if nobody ever told you how. And if you're watching this late at night and you know what I'm talking about, if you know what it feels like to be the Stanley Pines in your own story, the one who feels like they're not enough, the one who covers their pain with jokes and hustle, and never letting anyone see them vulnerable, I want you to know that the scrapbook is real. The people who see through you, who love you despite the armor, who refuse to let you disappear, they're real, and they're worth saying please for. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I genuinely mean that. These long videos, these deep dives, they take forever to make, but they're the most meaningful thing I get to do with this channel. If you enjoyed this, if it made you think or feel or want to rewatch Gravity Falls, subscribe. Tell a friend. Leave a comment about your favorite Stan moment. I read every single one of them. And if you can't sleep, well, that's what the next video is for. But for now, close your eyes. Think about Glass Shard Beach and a boat called the Stan-O-War. Think about two kids who saw past the armor. Think about an old man who saved the world by being the one person nobody thought mattered. Good night. And remember, when there's no cops around, anything's legal. Actually, one more thing. I said earlier that David Lynch was offered the role of Bill Cipher and turned it down, and that Alex Hirsch ended up voicing Bill using what he's described as a bad impression of Lynch. And I bring that up now because there's a David Lynch quality to Gravity Falls that I think matters for understanding Stan's story. Lynch's work is full of characters who are simultaneously mundane and extraordinary, who contain multitudes that never fully resolve, who live in small towns where the surface reality and the hidden reality are always in tension. Sound familiar? Stan is a Lynchian character living in a town that feels like it fell out of Twin Peaks and landed on the Disney Channel. He's ordinary on the surface, an old man in a tourist trap, and extraordinary underneath, a self-taught engineer, an identity thief, a dimensional rescuer, and eventually the man who defeats evil itself. And the show never fully reconciles those two versions of him. It lets them coexist. It lets him be both, the con man and the hero, the liar and the lover, the cynic and the optimist. The man who says please never made him any money, and the man who says please to save the world. That tension, the refusal to simplify, is what makes Stan great. Not good, great. And I think it's what Gravity Falls will ultimately be remembered for. Not the codes, or the mysteries, or the demon, but the old man in the fez who couldn't say what he meant, who loved people he thought he didn't deserve, and who, when the moment came, gave up everything without hesitation, and without complaint, and without even being able to remember that he'd done it. I guess he was good for something after all.